Welcome everybody. It's great to see such a good turnout. Unsurprising perhaps, bearing in mind the difficulties and the issues that we're facing as businesses, considering obviously the COVID situation, but also with the 1st of January looming very strongly ahead of us. We recognise as businesses that, of course, we are leaving the EU single market and customs union, and we're in a period of transition. And this is meant to be a time for planning and clarity. But of course, it's been a very difficult time for us as businesses, and our government might say it's been a difficult time for them in negotiations as well. But there is still an awful lot that we do know, and there's an awful lot that we can address. Government has been working hard to provide clarity and easements on such things as border control timetables, customs declarations, processes, duties, etc. So there are things that we do know, and this event is really there to help you. We've been engaging businesses for the past 18 months on this subject, and they continue to express concern around the needs of minimizing impacts, particularly on their suppliers and their customers. That's their key goal. The Brexit trading arrangements do still need clarity. There are issues that have been highlighted to us around duties and VAT, double duties on re-exporting and rules of origin, labelling, the GB and NI borders, of course, zero tariff development areas, matters around dispute resolution and quota limits. Quite a few matters of concern which businesses have been highlighting. And this is critical to Hampshire due to our strengths in exporting and world-class ports. We're not unique, but we are a centre for exporting as a county. And because of that, it's no doubt that businesses are ready to seize the opportunities and the challenges, but they do need help. And this is part of the reason why we're doing the event today. Like many businesses, I have no doubt that COVID has been dominating your planning, and Brexit will have been taking a bit of a back seat. We're here to try and help that and overcome that. The bandwidth for businesses have been very narrow as a result of COVID over the past 6 months or so. We also recognise that this is not a great time to reinvest. It's not a great time to stockpile goods and all the other things that you might feel are necessary for your business. But there is an opportunity out there. There's an opportunity for addressing global opportunities, including the EU, and I'm sure today we'll hear something around that as well. So basically, this event is here to help you. As I always say, this is your community of practice. Chambers of Solutions is here in order to get you and other businesses exchanging ideas, exchanging practice, understanding the challenges that you have, and I hope that you enjoy it. I'll hand back to you, Rob.
Thank you, Ross. So let's get into the meat of the session. Before we do that, some brief introductions. Rob Lewis, one of the directors of Mission Performance Limited. We're a Hampshire-based business just by the Daedalus Airfield. We work globally. Before lockdown, we did that face-to-face. Now we do it all virtually. We have 4 practice areas. We help people to lead, to coach, to communicate, and to manage risk in uncertain times. I'll put my details on the chat function so you can get in contact with me on LinkedIn or email as you wish. The structure of the session to follow then, we'll start with the introductions from our panelists, and then we'll move to breakout sessions where the panelists will move from room to room. You will stay where you are, and then we'll have a 10-minute summary at the end before closing the meeting. That's the big picture. Maximum participation, maximum questions, maximum engagement is encouraged, so don't be shy. Let's meet our panel. Let's start with Daphne. Would you mind introducing yourself and your specialist subject?
Morning, everybody. My name is Daphne Comber. I'm the Customs Agency Manager for Portico Shipping in Portsmouth Port. I've been in the business now for 30+ years, so I can actually remember a time when we used to have to do customs declarations for everything that came over the border. So it's a little bit like deja vu going on, Groundhog Day. So yeah, so if there's any questions from anybody around customs, documentation and duties, etc., then I am here to help.
Okay, Daphne, let's turn to Linda.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome, thank you for coming along. My name is Linda Middleton-Jones, and I'm the founder of a company called International Trade Matters. We're based outside the county, but I did live in Hampshire for very many years, a little place called Middle Wallop. Some of you may know it. I've worked with, I can see smiles, Susan, yeah, good place. So I've lived in Germany, Cyprus and Spain, so I feel that, you know, I've served my time in Europe, but my law degree some years ago was actually in English, Spanish, European and international law. So I have a broad range of knowledge of things. I've also worked at 2 chambers of commerce as the directors of international trade. I spent a time as the supply chain manager of Hinckley. And some of you may have heard of the manufacturing barometer with the manufacturing advisory service. I was the author and creator of that service. So my company covers everything from accessing new markets to compliance, with everything in between and associated with that. And we deliver BCC accredited training. I'm currently working with Innovate to assist innovative new small companies to create export strategies and access new markets. And I'm particularly interested in how the context of international trade creates both barriers to trade and huge opportunities, and understanding how the first impacts the second provides guidance on your overseas strategies and markets, which is part of why we're here today. So making sure supply chains and markets are resilient is fundamental to our sustainability. And trust plays a part too. And this sort of covers my primary focus today, which is about data and how transfers of the same will be affected on implementation period. So we're moving from transition to implementation. And so data and, you know, the question of adequacy, if the EU consider that we have a correct level of protection of data. We're also going to be covering labelling, who and what info needs to be on the label, disputes, different types of law that are being discussed and moved around at the moment with regards to the resolution contracts, the review, the arbitration clauses, etc. And then finally, the regulations that include CE marks and REACH, and any other questions that I may be able to help with you later on. So thank you.
Thank you, Linda. We'll turn to Ziggy. Please, Ziggy.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I am a UK immigration solicitor and a consultant solicitor at JMA HR and Legal, and I'm delighted to join you today to talk about the immigration-related impacts of Brexit when employing EU nationals after Brexit. In general, I would focus on what businesses can do before Brexit in order to prepare for future recruitment of EU nationals, as well as looking at their existing workforce and steps that they need to take in order to avoid their workers having to miss out on that currently quite generous system in place to register those who are already in the UK, and then also to prepare for those new recruits from within the EU after the new year. I would be happy to discuss on also additional documentary requirements that employers will need to start keeping on account of the fact that work visas will be an essential part of the process after Brexit. I'll also be available for questions in this area and will be around during the breakout sessions to discuss further.
Thank you very much, Ziggy. Let's turn to Charlotte.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Bloomfield. I work for Womblebond Dickinson. We're a transatlantic law firm with multiple offices both in the UK and the US. I'm based out of the Southampton office. I am part of an 8-strong team in Southampton. We are a commercial law firm, so our interests lie predominantly with working with businesses, and we have a strong presence in Hampshire and the surrounding area. I have particular expertise and interest in non-tribunal, non-contentious work. I like the corporate and commercial support side of the employment advisory work in particular. And I've been asked to talk a little bit about the implication of Brexit on employment law. It's probably just worth saying that at the moment it's business as usual from a purely legal perspective. The ECJ is still ruling. We can still make we can still refer things to the ECJ at the moment, and that will be the case until the 31st of December. Thereafter, things will change slightly, and some of the legislation that we are used to seeing will be incorporated into UK law. That has been covered by the withdrawal bill. And then we'll move into slightly uncharted territory as the government tries to work out how and who can overrule or change the rules, and also whether or not we are going to remain following in harmony and in parallel with the rules in the EU. And much of that will depend on whether or not there is the terms of any trade deal that is reached. But now, what should we be doing to prepare our workforce? Well, there's some training to be done. Not everybody has as much experience as, for instance, Daphne, so they won't have experienced the need to obtain visas in order to travel. We've been very used to being able to hop on a train and just go to meetings wherever we want to in the EU, and that will obviously change. We also need to look at travel policies, handbooks and procedures for those things, upskilling staff, making sure that they're supported. But what we're also seeing is that a lot of companies are choosing to move their headquarters into EU countries or into countries that already have existing trade deals with the EU in order to give themselves consistency and certainty in the current climate. And that is affecting staff back here. So not only have we got reorganisations and restructures because of COVID, but also Brexit related. And that also needs to be managed very carefully. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Ziggy and I shall be working together in the breakout session because our two areas complement each other quite well.
Thank you, Charlotte. Stuart, would you please take the floor?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stuart Lyle. I'm a tax partner at BDO. We're a global accountancy firm. We have a Southampton office, as well as offices around the country and in, I can't remember how many, 160 odd countries around the world. And if it's scary enough to think about it, we have about 70,000 accountants that we employ around the world. So that's an awful lot of boring people, isn't it? So I'm here today to talk about mainly the tax implications of Brexit, and we'll cover off finance stuff as well, although I am not an expert in banking or finance in any shape or form. I'm a tax partner, mainly corporate tax. I chair our Brexit task force in the UK and EMEA. And so we're responsible for advising the firm on risks to the firm in relation to Brexit, but also providing advice and support to our clients. So I'm a corporate tax partner rather than an indirect tax partner, but I've spent many hours, you can imagine, with my indirect tax colleagues, and a lot of their knowledge has rubbed off. So we had to help you to find some of the solutions to your duty and VAT questions that I see are coming up on the chat already. The other thing to bear in mind, that whilst you're all on here, is that there is a way of getting all of your staff trained up for customs duty, tax free. Government are paying for duty training for staff. and we're able to provide a service where we can provide training to up to a value of £1,500 funded totally by the government. So they are trying to help businesses. As people have mentioned, there is easements that the government have brought in, particularly around VAT and import duties as well. I was at a meeting at number 10 about a year ago prior to the previous changes that were going to be coming in, and HMRC are listening and trying to help. So I'll look forward to talking to you in the breakouts. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, panel. Daphne, if I may come back to you, dealing with clients as you do on a daily basis, what are the sort of top three questions or queries that your clients are asking of you right now?
So at the minute, obviously, this is probably the first time that a lot of UK businesses have ever had to even think about doing a customs declaration. And it is an absolute minefield. So the first thing is, believe it or not, is a lot of people are not registered with a UK EORI number, which they should be, in order to import and export from the UK. Documentation. The traders that are already familiar with trading with the rest of the world, they're pretty much keyed up for everything. But even then, the questions are coming, what documentation do we need? And also as well is that I don't think businesses are actually prepared for the fact that if they're exporting, they have to make an export declaration, but they need an agent over the other side to make an import declaration, and then vice versa. So they need an export agent in Europe to do the export declaration, and then they need an agent in the UK or the systems themselves to do the import declaration. So I think it's going to put quite a financial burden on businesses, and they're not necessarily prepared.
Great, thank you for that, Daphne. Well, purpose of the breakout sessions that we can go into a little bit more detail with that, with some very practical tips on where to go for information to get prepared as best you can. Same question to you, Linda. With your clients over recent weeks and months, what would be the equivalent?
I think we're having a lot of people or starting to realise that something is actually happening, and we're getting a lot of calls for bespoke training on the things that Daphne has mentioned. Certainly, customs declarations. Less so on introduction to exporting, but much more on export documentation, import documentation, and how Incoterms, of course, has raised its head again, because a lot of people are saying, well, what are they? What have they got to do with international trade? I've never heard of them, so they can't be any good, and that sort of thing. So I think the world is waking up, and we are doing some. For me, there are a number of different types of exporters. There are the ones that do it well and the ones who think that they do it well. We're just hoping that most of those, and we're doing this now, is going in and doing an export audit just to make sure that they're safe and secure, that they've got their processes in place now, and that they are prepared for the implementation period that's coming over the hill. We're very, very busy, and I'm sure that's the same for everybody else. It seems to me that, you know, we're all working twice as hard, and the Zoom calls affect that. But I would say that we are pushing out that we have to have relationships with the people that we are dealing with in Europe or the rest of the world. And it is really, really, really important to emphasize that you keep in contact, that there are communications.
Okay, thank you, Linda. We can go into detail in the breakouts on those specific points. Ziggy, same question to you. What are your clients coming to you, queries and questions that they may have at this time?
Well, the main points to look at really is whether all of the existing EU national workers can continue to work the answer to that is yes, if they register by the deadline. So the main point to take is that before the end of June 2021, EU nationals who are already in the UK, and the arrival date has to be before Brexit, i.e. end of this year, they can register and secure what's known as settled status, which is another term for indefinite leave to remain, or pre-settled status, which will allow them to continue residing and working in the UK for until such time they accrue 5 years of residence and get indefinite leave to remain. The other point, a frequent question I have been receiving is for newly arrival EU national workers, what is the process? And for that really is the new skilled worker visas being introduced. It's actually taking effect as from 1st of December. The new rules have been published last week. So that is a big step up when it comes to, having come from a background of employing EU nationals was just checking their passport, and all of a sudden there is this lengthy and quite costly process to secure a work visa. First and foremost, employers need to have a sponsor license. That's another long and quite paperwork related application. So employers themselves have to be approved employers by having applied and secured a sponsor license. Once they have that, for each individual they want to recruit after the 1st of January 2021, they need to issue a certificate of sponsorship and apply for a visa. So that's quite a long process. So I've been receiving quite a lot of queries and discussions around that subject.
Great. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you for that, Ziggy. I think, again, we can go into the detail of that within each breakout, and I encourage people to do exactly that in a second. So, Charlotte, can I ask you the same question?
So I think related to what Ziggy's just said, most employers are concerned about continuing to have an agile and diverse workforce and how they maintain that workforce. And clearly that is more of an business immigration question than it necessarily is a pure employment question. Having said that, there is a lot about upskilling and making sure that that there is succession planning, and there's a lot of HR heavy work to be done in the background. If we can take a silver lining from COVID, there's already been a lot of home working going on. So whilst there might be tax implications and other implications around providing services into the EU post-Brexit, there is at least a level of comfort around the fact that people are now able to work remotely and understand how that can work and how they can support their staff. So some of those processes have inadvertently been put in place, which will make people Brexit ready, but actually were due to COVID.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Charlotte. And Stuart, same question to you.
I mean, it's a whole range of things. A lot of our clients, and it's interesting hearing sort of Linda and Daphne's comments. They're very similar areas that they're talking to us about. Incoterms has been something that has raised its head on a lot of people's questions, and it'll have a massive impact on people's VAT position because it determines whether or not you need to be VAT registered potentially in European countries if you are delivering on the wrong Incoterms. And also there's a commercial issue about whether or not your customers are prepared to be the importer of record or not. So I think there's going to be some debates between suppliers and customers as to exactly who is going to be the importer of record and therefore where the VAT position is. Duty is an issue, but our duty guides pretty well maxed out on training rather than advice at the moment. Trying getting everybody up to speed. Companies like Daphne's company that have got people like her in place are all fine. There's a lot of smaller companies that really do need some support. So because they've never done anything but trade with the EU, so they don't know about export documentation and things. And interestingly, they're also asking about, is there actually going to be a deal or not? And people read a lot in the press. There's an awful lot of political shenanigans that you read about in the press, but all of our intelligence is telling us that there will be a deal. There's an 80% chance there will be some form of deal. And we've seen this week that there's the EU have come back to the negotiating table. The EU team are getting a lot of pressure from behind them, from both member states and businesses in the EU, to make sure that a sensible deal is struck to prevent any disruption to trade flows across the channel. So I think people should look at it a little bit more on the positive side than maybe the press are at the moment, because I think there is a good chance that we will get some form of free trade agreement, at least in principle, in place for the beginning of January, with the details being filled in over the coming sort of months and years. And as we all know with the EU, we'll be forever negotiating with them about various issues, whether it's trading or standards or whatever. That negotiation will never go away, but actually being able to move the goods should hopefully be reasonably straightforward post-January, although services will always be a poor relation to goods. Free trade agreements always struggle to deal with services, and normally you need to have free movement of people in order to be able to deliver services, and that's something that's going to take a lot longer to resolve.
Okay, Stuart, we'll dive into the detail of that in the breakout. I'll turn to Ross now. Ross, can you provide a perspective from where you sit in your network?
Yes, thanks, Rob. I mean, as many of you hopefully do know, the Chamber of Commerce is quite deeply involved in international trade. We do export documentation, so if you have any needs in that regard, and as many have said, that they are a changing landscape to a certain extent, but it's not an overly complex situation. But we have a team of 5 people who are there to really help you throughout that whole process. And I would just say get in touch with the Chamber of Commerce, because they can certainly help you on all kinds of export documentation, not just for the changes post transition regarding to the EU, but also across the globe, as we do, as part of our day job, as it were. We also are growing our customs clearance service as well, which is new to us as a chamber, but the government has, I think has been said by 1 or 2 people, been prompting businesses, whether they be chambers of commerce, freight forwarders, courier companies and others, to increase the capacity around customs. And so we have done likewise. And so we have a customs service called Chamber Customs, which can also be accessed and alongside the documentation. But the most important thing that we do, I think, is actually represent the voice of business up the line to government. And a lot of the clarity that has been sought, I've put some links onto the chat. A lot of the clarity has been sought has been through constant pressure from our national network, which is British Chambers of Commerce, to address some of the gaps in the knowledge. And a lot of it we find is administrative gaps. There are simple things around what is the paperwork, how do we go about doing this? Where can we find the knowledge and the training in order to address this change? These are fairly practical and simple issues. And so, we're here to help with that, but also we're here to learn from you, because the important thing is your voice. So if you are finding that there are some intractable issues that are not being addressed by government, whether that's through the negotiated deal with the EU or whether that is just generally because of poor communications, we need to know. So please do let me know outside of this meeting, and I will make sure that we pass that up the line to government and hopefully get some clarity around that. But we do have a helpline. Quite simply, telephone the Chamber of Commerce if you do have some issues. And what we do is, you know, if we don't know, we know somebody that does, and we're very good at networking you through to all of the partners that you have on the call today and others in order to find the kind of solutions that you need.
Thank you, Ross. We'll probably reach the natural break for putting you into the breakout sessions. As Bob has put on the chat, encourage you to ask as many questions as possible. It won't be videoed. What you say in the session is entirely within your group. So please feel free to ask whatever question you want. So I'm going to hand over the reins to Bob. Bob's going to put you into those breakout rooms. You'll rotate through 4 of them, and we'll look forward to seeing you in 40 minutes time. Bob, over to you.
Okay, I'm just going to allocate you to your room, and you should be dragged off there shortly. I'd forgotten about the late arrivers, that it doesn't automatically allocate them if they come in after you've done the automatic allocation.
No worries, Bob. They're in there now. Having a good
Rob, are you able to get that material with respect to CCN across to me this week, and then I can start working with Diane on what you've asked for? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's. Remind me specifically. Are we recording on video at the moment?
We probably.
Welcome back.
I moved us back in, Bob.
Okay.
So, yep, the others should be along in about 30 seconds, I expect. But
Had some good discussions, Ross.
yes, very good, actually, very good. I think we're just warming up now, so we're looking forward to the second half. Everyone frantically looking at their Outlook calendars saying, hang on, what?
Such a massive topic, isn't it?
Yes, no, it's brilliant.
Let's see if Duncan is.
I'd be happy for a sort of final 10 minutes if you would, Rob, just to sort of, let people, wrap up any unanswered questions, anything like that.
Yeah, okay. Well, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you've had 4 very good discussions on the 4 distinct topics. I know there were probably some questions that you didn't get the chance to ask. One in particular from Duncan. I was in a session with him earlier on, and Stuart was about to give him the answer before he was moved out of the breakout. So Stuart, do you remember that question about authorized representatives and medical products? Is it appropriate for you to answer that, finish off your answer to that question now, Stuart?
Give me a second to reread it. I've been through a few other conversations. Let me just, I'll reread it and I'll come back to him.
As you're doing that, so for everyone else, the chat will be put into a Word document and sent out with other resources for you. And on there will be links to people on the panel, as well as obviously the Hampshire Chamber. And as Ross pointed out, they sit at the hub. They can signpost your query in any which direction it needs to go into. So please use that resource. It's a rich one, and there are only 1 or 2 handshakes away from the people that you need to speak to. So I'd strongly encourage you to do that.
There's another very good question on the chat, Rob, from Carol Adams as well, which somebody might want to pick up on.
Okay, well, let's Duncan's question first, if we may. Then Carol, if you like, you can address the panel directly if you wish. Otherwise, we'll just go with your written question in the chat. So, Stuart, are you ready?
Yeah, hi Duncan. You're selling B2B to customers, looks like across the EU. I think the question comes down to, again, to your Incoterms. How are you going to deliver to your customer? Who's going to be the importer of record? If your customer is the importer of record, then they will deal with the import VAT. If you are, then you will have to. The fact that it's medical products doesn't change that. If you are distributing across Europe, I would, sort of looking at your question about would you have an EU site, I probably would, and have a distribution centre for the EU and distribute out from there to your various customers. And we had a conversation earlier, I know, about the joys of employment law in Holland, but Holland is a good place for a distribution centre, as is Belgium as well. So I would look at that seriously if you're distributing across Europe your medical products. So I don't know if any of my legal friends have got any comments to make with regards to Dutch employment law.
I can't comment on Dutch employment law, but I know that I've dealt with a lot of reorganisations which have ended up with headquarters and locations being cited in Holland, and we are dealing on an increasing basis with HR departments operating out of Holland.
Yeah.
What about to the point about a site or an agent? What's your view on that, Stuart?
Well, an agent is easier from a tax perspective. If they're not a dependent agent, then they won't create any other tax issues for you. So permanent establishment for corporation tax, etc. Where if you set up your own distribution, then you will have all of your direct tax issues to deal with in country. So you would have to deal with Dutch corporation tax on your profits that you make, etc. where if you've got a third-party agent, then you don't have those issues. You just have the cost of dealing with that agent. That agent would then, you'd have to discuss them whether they are taking responsibility to be the importer, exporter of record, etc. So you could take away a lot of your headaches, but of course you take away some of your margin, because that agent would want something for doing those services.
Okay. Hopefully that's gone a long way to help that question, Duncan. With one eye on time, Carol, would you like to put your question to the panel directly? Carol, unmute if you want to, and switch your video on. You have the floor. I think you're muted, Carol.
Hello.
Hi, Carol. Please go answer your question.
Hi. Sorry, I've had trouble with the audio throughout the session. Apologies for that. We've been informed that we should be, for our imports coming from the EU suppliers, that we should ask them to pre-alert us of their shipment 24 to 48 hours prior to shipping, so that we can complete the import entry before the goods land in the UK. So we're clear with that, but it's on the export side from the UK to our EU customer or supplier. Is there something similar that we will need to do to pre-alert so that we can lodge the export declaration in France, or is there no requirement on that front?
Thanks,
Should
Carol.
we continue as we are today, really, with like worldwide shipment?
Okay, Daphne, that sounds like it's someone for you.
I was just actually replying to you, Carol, on the chat. So I would recommend that you provide your forwarder details of your export as far in advance as you can. The transport company or haulier that's actually moving your goods, they will also need this information, you see, prior to loading to the vessel, to load into the ferry. So they will need proof of export. Also, your forwarder might have contact details in Europe for the European agent. So they can actually send a copy of the export to the agent in wherever it's customs clearing in France. And they can then prepare their import declaration, which the haulier will also need. So he will need proof of export and proof of import. So yeah, if you know that you've got a ferry booking in 3 or 4 days and you've got your commercial documents, then I would suggest that you do your formalities as far in advance as possible.
Yeah,
I know it's not always the case. So
no, we're mainly using couriers actually, because they're quite smallish shipments.
Right. Okay. So yeah, so courier services are more than well equipped for being able to give you this information. I've already spoken to somebody where the couriers they actually prepare the export documentation for them. So they will already have processes in place to make sure that the export is completed correctly and also the import is completed correctly on the other side. So yeah.
Right, okay. So there's no requirement then to, well, I mean, there is anyway, isn't there, for worldwide shipments to have that lodgement, the entry lodgement before the goods leave, because they have to clear that side of, anyway, so it's pretty much no change then, or for Brexit to shipments to the EU.
Yeah.
Because we already ship worldwide.
Yeah.
You know.
So whatever you're doing for your worldwide shipments, basically you're just going to transpose that really for your EU shipments. Yeah. So at least it's not a massive change for your company, because you're quite used to that anyway. So
yeah, lovely. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Thanks, Daphne.
Thank you.
Carol, we've got time for one more question, which I'm going to take directly from the chat, which is a question from Nick, talking about Nick, if you can hear me, would you like to put your question to the panel? directly. Otherwise, I'll read it out for you. It's the, could the panel comment on the advisability, practicality for a UK firm to utilise the form of agency called a commissionaire to obviate the effects of the commercial agents' arrangements? Is that one that you could comment on, Stuart?
Very briefly, it's something that I haven't looked at for many years, but commissionaire structures are something that UK businesses do struggle with because it's under European law rather than UK law, and it's very odd. It's not, people think of it as a undisclosed agency, but it's more than that. It's not an easy structure to put in place. It used to be used for various, I suppose in the old days, I could say, tax avoidance motives. It's something that is, you'd have to go into it with your eyes open. It's a very complicated structure. The amount of the legals involved around it. I don't know whether, Charlotte, you've ever looked at anything like this as a lawyer.
I must confess, I leave that to my commercial colleague.
Yeah, it's because of the type of law that it's the fundamentals of law that it's based on. It's a real struggle for a UK business to get their head around it, because people always think of it and try to simplify it as a undisclosed agency, but it's not. It's something very different to that. So if Nick's thinking about it, I would say that he needs to take some advice from an international law firm and an international firm of accountants that can really sort of give him the nuts and bolts as to how it works.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Well, let's. I think we should probably be bringing it to a sort of formal conclusion. I'd like to thank the panelists. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to hand over to Ross to say a few final words for the session. Ross.
Firstly, thanks very much, Rob. Firstly, I'd like to thank Rob and Bob for their usual excellent way of facilitating and hosting today's event. Thank you so much for your efforts. It's been really brilliant. Also, thank you to the panelists, obviously to Charlotte, Ziggy, Daphne, Linda, Stuart, superb input, and actually to every one of you who's contributed, whether that's in questions, whether this is part of the audience and the guests today, or whether that's actually providing and sharing your knowledge across the whole piece. It's been really superb. I do know that we could actually sit here for the rest of the day and we still wouldn't have bottomed out all of the issues that you're going to be addressing. You know, the very matter of this sort of probably once in a lifetime, not once in a generation, changes to the landscape of the practices as far as international trade in particular is concerned, but actually it impacts every other part of our business life as well. And it's really a great opportunity as a business community to come together and to explore new ways of doing things, and if you like, sort of set a reset to some form of factory settings and take your business forward from there. And I've noticed that that's what businesses have been doing. COVID has done that to a certain extent for us, and certainly Brexit has been doing that for us as well. It's been a bit of a shock to the system for us all, but I'm absolutely sure that in 2021 and 2022 onwards, we're going to be seeing some really enterprising activities coming out of the businesses that are shared at this call today and across the whole of our business network. We are here to help you. We're here to make sure that those experiences are positive and working with our partners. So I want to do a bit of a call out for the LEPs, for Enterprise M3 LEP, there to help you with their growth hub. I think Susan's on the call. And also to Solent LEP as well and their growth hub. Both organisations structured there to help you take your business forward, and also to DIT in terms of all of the answers and planning you need for the global trading opportunities that we are confronting. thank you so much. This has been a brilliant Chamber of Solutions. We do have ones, we'll be sending you full details around, which is around the Kickstarter scheme, around wellbeing. We've got lots of very good events coming up for us in the future, and we look forward to seeing you on those calls as well. Take care, and thank you so much for your contribution. Rob.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks once again for being. Just a reminder, the video will be out as shortly, and we'll put that on the Hampshire Chamber website, as well as the Word doc with the saved chat with all the links. So this is the beginning. Keep stay in touch, reach out to us. There's lots of answers that we can point in the right direction to. So the very best of luck to all of you, and we hope to see you on the next session. I think that's on the 10th of November for the Kickstarter program. So thank you, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks all for joining.
Thank you.
The panelists should just stay.